was the major sticking point that Democrats said it might be. Does this put us any closer to a last-minute deal? Joining us now, Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent from Vermont who caucuses with the Democrats. Always good to see you, Senator. Good evening.
Good to be with you, Chris.
Tell us what your status report is. Where do you think we are in these negotiations?
Well, I think, Chris, people have got to understand what the so-called chain CPI is. It sounds like a technical term. In real life, it means that if you're 65 years of age today on Social Security, by the time you're 75, it will be a $600 a year reduction, and by the time you're 85, it'll be $1,000 a year. That is a huge cut for people trying to get by on $15,000 or $20,000 a year. What the chain CPI would do is significantly cut benefits for disabled veterans and for the spouses of those people who died in Iraq and Afghanistan. That is not how you balance the budget. And I think the other context, Chris, that we've got to look at is what is going on in America economically. And that is we have a middle class which is in significant decline while the wealthiest people are doing phenomenally well. Who should pick up the burden, or a significant part of the burden, for deficit reduction? Working people who are unemployed, working people who have seen their wages go down, or the top 2% who by and large have done phenomenally well in recent years while their effective tax rate, as Mitt Romney reminded us by not releasing his tax returns, is extremely low. So to my mind, what this deficit reduction debate is about is asking the wealthiest people, the large corporations, to start helping us with deficit reduction and give a break for a change to the middle class and working families in this country.
But now that what is essentially a cost of living adjustment on Social Security, and as you say, one that would mean less money for senior citizens, is off the table, are you more optimistic about getting the deal done in the next 30 hours?
Well, we've still got a long way to go.
What do you see as the major sticking points?
I'll tell you one of the major sticking points, that if I were a Republican, I would be profoundly embarrassed. What they want to do is continue the 2010 agreement on lower estate tax rates, which means, Chris, a $120 billion tax break over a 10-year period for the top 0.2% of 1%. Top 0.2% of 1% get a $120 billion tax break, and then people come forward and they say, oh, we are very serious about deficit reduction. Third area that we have to look at, the president wanted, as you recall, a few weeks ago, $1.6 trillion in new revenue. We're now down to, as I understand it, about $600 billion, a significant reduction. And if you don't have new revenue coming in from the wealthiest people, it will mean, as we go down the pike, as we go to the debt ceiling debate, a continued attack by the Republicans on programs that working families of our country and the middle class desperately need.
There are so many issues like this that have been originally talked about, but when push comes to shove and it comes up to the absolute deadline and everybody is hopefully still talking tomorrow, how narrow could this deal be to get it done?
I'm sorry, how what?
How narrow could this deal be? Could it really just be about whose taxes expire and whose don't, and what that threshold is?
As I think some of your commentators made before I got on, what people have got to understand is the world does not collapse in terms of this so-called deficit cliff, which many of us see as a slope. It doesn't collapse on January 1st. Not everybody's taxes are going to go up. You have to January, you have to February to work that out. Programs, discretionary spendings is not necessarily going to be cut in January or even February. We have time to work that out. The immediate impact, and these are the issues that have got to be dealt with, 2 million workers will lose unemployment benefits, and these are families that are just struggling to keep their heads above water economically. You got to deal with that.
Well, Dianne Feinstein has been she's talked a lot about that, but she's also tied those 2.1 million people on unemployment benefits to her concern about a contraction. You know, a contraction in this economy that is so fragile right now. And are you concerned at all, even though people may not actually see it or feel it in January, are you concerned about things like consumer confidence and people stopping spending?
Well, it's not just consumer confidence. In the case of employment compensation, you're talking about money that people are not, millions of families are not going to have to spend. Will that have an impact on the economy? It certainly will. And consumer confidence is a big issue. So, you know, I hope that we can avoid going over the cliff. But the Republicans, in a sense, have dominated the negotiations in 2010, 2011. Right now, we are to stand up for the middle class.
Senator Bernie Sanders, always good to see you, and thank you so much for staying up and talking with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, Americans' frustration with Congress may well be summarized in this simple statement. In terms of output, the 112th Congress has been the least effective in decades in